We often hear people say, "The world is getting dumber." At first glance, it might sound like a grumpy exaggeration, just another nostalgic complaint about how things used to be better. But when we look closer at the way information spreads, how culture rewards certain behaviors, and how technology interacts with human psychology, the idea doesn't seem so far-fetched. Today, our societies are saturated with entertainment that is shallow, addictive, and engineered to hold our attention without nourishing our minds. The rise of viral memes, 10-second videos, and endless celebrity scandals suggests that attention itself has become a commodity. In the past, knowledge was scarce and valuable. Now information is everywhere, but wisdom is rare. We scroll endlessly, consuming fragments of content designed not to inform us, but to keep us hooked. The problem of shallow attention. Modern technology exploits one of our brain's most vulnerable features, our craving for novelty. Social media platforms are built to deliver rapid bursts of stimulation. Instead of reflecting deeply, we are encouraged to react instantly, with a like, a share, or an angry comment. Psychologists describe this as a form of dopamine hijacking, where each notification gives us a hit of reward, keeping us stuck in the loop. As a result, attention spans are shrinking. In classrooms, students struggle to read long texts without checking their phones. At work, emails and alerts fragment our focus into pieces. The ability to sit with a difficult idea, to wrestle with ambiguity, or to carefully weigh evidence is slowly eroding. In its place, quick takes and surface-level impressions dominate. Why simple messages win? The decline isn't just about distraction. It's also about how ideas compete in the marketplace of attention. Complex truths rarely go viral, but emotional slogans do. A nuanced article on climate science will never spread as quickly as a shocking meme that denies it. This isn't because people are naturally stupid. It's because our brains are wired to prioritize simplicity, emotion, and certainty. Sociologists point out that misinformation spreads 6 times faster on social media than factual reporting. Why? Because it is designed to trigger outrage, fear, or amusement. In a noisy environment, the loudest and most dramatic voices drown out the careful ones. The result is a culture where emotional resonance matters more than accuracy. Education and the failure of critical thinking. You might think education would be a shield against this trend. Unfortunately, modern schooling often emphasizes memorization and standardized testing rather than independent thought. Students learn to repeat facts, but not to question them. They practice solving predictable problems, but rarely explore messy, open-ended ones. Critical thinking, the ability to ask why and how do we know, is not rewarded in a system designed for efficiency and measurable outcomes. And so, even as literacy rates climb, the skill of reading deeply and thinking critically may be declining. A culture of comfort over complexity. Another force driving this manufactured stupidity is cultural. Modern societies increasingly value comfort, speed, and certainty over difficulty, patience, and doubt. People prefer easy narratives, good versus evil, winners versus losers, right versus wrong. But real life is complicated. Real knowledge requires tolerating ambiguity. Philosopher Neil Postman once warned that societies might not collapse because of censorship, but because they drown in trivial entertainment. He argued that people would not need to be forced into ignorance. They would choose it willingly, distracted by pleasure and spectacle. Looking around today, his prediction feels disturbingly accurate. Who benefits? It's worth asking. If the system makes us more distracted and less thoughtful, who gains from it? The answer is uncomfortable. Politicians benefit when citizens are too divided and emotional to demand real accountability. Corporations profit from an attention economy that monetizes every click. Even media outlets, struggling for survival, rely on sensational headlines to keep readers engaged. In other words, stupidity is not just accidental. It is manufactured. It is profitable. And it serves the interests of those who prefer a passive, distracted public to one that is reflective and critical. The larger danger. So, when people say society is getting dumber, it isn't about individual intelligence suddenly disappearing. It's about cultural and technological systems that reward shallowness over depth, outrage over curiosity, and distraction over reflection. The true danger is not that we don't know enough facts. It's that we are losing the ability to think about them meaningfully. And unless we recognize this, we risk drifting into a future where noise overwhelms signal and where wisdom itself becomes rare. Politics thrives on simplification. If there is one place where the preference for shallow thinking becomes most visible, it is politics. Modern democracies depend on citizens who can weigh evidence, evaluate trade-offs, and make informed choices. But instead, voters are often bombarded with slogans, emotional appeals, and carefully crafted soundbites. Politicians know that nuance rarely wins elections. A policy that requires 10 minutes to explain will always lose against a 5-word slogan that feels emotionally satisfying. Build the wall. Take back control. Make America great again. These messages succeed not because they are accurate, but because they bypass reason and appeal directly to fear, pride, or nostalgia. In this environment, complexity becomes a liability. Leaders who attempt to explain the difficult realities of climate change, immigration, or healthcare are drowned out by opponents who offer simple scapegoats and dramatic promises. The result is a politics of spectacle rather than substance. Media, feeding the cycle. The media plays a central role in amplifying this process. News outlets compete for attention in an overcrowded landscape. Sensationalism sells. Outrage sells even better. Instead of sober reporting, headlines are often designed to shock, enrage, or amuse. Consider how a single misleading tweet can shape public debate for days. By the time fact-checkers catch up, the damage is done. People rarely read corrections with the same energy they read the original lie. The incentive structure of digital media ensures that speed matters more than accuracy, and engagement matters more than truth. Moreover, algorithms personalize information streams to match what we already believe. This echo chamber effect reinforces confirmation bias, making us more certain of our views and more hostile to opposing perspectives. Over time, entire populations can live in separate realities, each convinced that the other side is hopelessly deluded. The entertainment trap. It is not just the news. Entertainment culture itself encourages distraction over reflection. The rise of binge-watching, viral TikTok challenges, and endless scrolling reflects a society where pleasure is instant and constant. This is not inherently bad. Everyone needs rest and fun, but the scale and design of these platforms mean many people spend hours consuming content that does not challenge them in any way. Historian Yuval Noah Harari has warned that such distractions may be the most effective form of control in modern society. Instead of suppressing dissent, rulers can simply flood the public with so much entertainment that citizens no longer have the energy or interest to resist. Bread and circuses worked for the Romans. Now we have memes and streaming services, daily life, and the decline of thought. These cultural forces don't just affect politics or media, they shape our daily interactions. At work, meetings are shortened into bullet points. On social media, complex ideas are reduced to infographics or inspirational quotes. Even personal conversations are often shallow, revolving around trends, gossip, or outrage rather than genuine dialogue. The constant exposure to shallow content creates what psychologists call cognitive offloading. Instead of storing knowledge in our minds, we rely on devices to remember, interpret, and even decide for us. Why struggle to recall historical events when Google can answer in seconds? Why wrestle with ethical dilemmas when influencers provide ready-made opinions? Over time, this dependence weakens the muscles of critical thought. Just as a body grows weaker without exercise, a mind grows dull without intellectual challenge. We become quick to react, but slow to reflect. Manufactured division. Another consequence of this environment is division. Simplified narratives encourage us versus them thinking. Instead of seeing opponents as fellow citizens with different perspectives, we see them as enemies. Political tribalism replaces civic cooperation. The more stupid and polarized the debate becomes, the easier it is for elites to control the outcome. As the philosopher Hannah Arendt observed, authoritarian systems thrive not when everyone agrees with the leader, but when citizens no longer know what is true at all. Confusion and distrust create apathy, and apathy creates obedience. The psychological trap. To understand why this trend is so powerful, we must look at the human brain itself. Psychologists such as Daniel Kahneman have shown that our minds operate with two systems. System 1, fast and intuitive, and System 2, slow and analytical. Most of the time, we default to System 1. It is easier and quicker. Modern society exploits this bias. Social media is built on instant reactions, likes, shares, angry comments. Every notification triggers a small burst of dopamine, rewarding impulsive behavior. This creates a feedback loop where shallow engagement feels satisfying, while deep reflection feels exhausting. The tragedy is that once our brains adapt to this rhythm, it becomes harder to sustain focus on demanding tasks like reading a book or analyzing a complex issue. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. The brain rewires itself to match the environment. If the environment rewards distraction, the brain becomes better at being distracted. Erosion of memory and depth. Another effect of this digital environment is what researchers call digital amnesia. Because we know information is always available online, we are less likely to commit it to memory. While this may seem harmless, it weakens our ability to connect ideas over time. Knowledge is not just about facts. It is about the patterns we recognize when those facts live in our minds. When memory weakens, depth disappears. A society with poor memory is doomed to repeat mistakes. This is why George Santayana warned, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The endless churn of new content ensures that history feels irrelevant, and wisdom preserved for centuries is lost in the flood of novelty. The danger to democracy. The decline of critical thought is not only a cultural concern, it is a political threat. Democracies rely on citizens who can question authority, demand evidence, and hold leaders accountable. When people lose that ability, democracy itself becomes fragile. Studies from MIT have shown that false news spreads 6 times faster than the truth on platforms like Twitter. If millions of citizens act on falsehoods, elections can be swayed, public trust eroded, and societies divided. As misinformation becomes normal, people stop believing in the possibility of truth altogether. This is the perfect breeding ground for authoritarianism. The subtle control of power. Philosopher Michel Foucault argued that power does not only operate through force, it shapes how people think and what they pay attention to. In our time, the most effective form of control is distraction. If the public is absorbed in trivial content, leaders do not need to silence them. Silence happens naturally when no one is paying attention. This explains why stupidity in society is not simply accidental. It serves a function. A distracted, divided population is easier to control. Corporations profit from endless scrolling, political leaders benefit from shallow divisions, and media companies thrive on outrage. Seeds of resistance. But if this decline is engineered, it can also be resisted. History shows that periods of cultural decay can give birth to renewal. The Renaissance emerged from the so-called Dark Ages by reviving forgotten wisdom and combining it with new discoveries. Resistance begins with awareness. Recognize when you are being manipulated by emotional headlines or shallow trends. Ask, who benefits from me believing this? Awareness breaks the spell. The next step is discipline. Wisdom does not happen by accident. It must be cultivated. This means choosing to read long-form works, engaging with material that challenges you, and practicing patience and thought. Dialogue is equally essential. True conversation, listening, questioning, and reflecting sharpens the mind. Philosopher Martin Buber described this as the I-thou relationship, where we encounter the other as a subject, not an object. Restoring genuine dialogue can rebuild the public sphere. Finally, silence is revolutionary. In an age of constant noise, choosing to pause, reflect, and think deeply is a radical act. As Viktor Frankl wrote, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. That space is where freedom and wisdom live. A turning point. We stand at a turning point. If we surrender to distraction, the decline will continue. But if we consciously resist, if enough individuals choose depth over noise, society can rediscover the clarity that once drove human progress. The future is not predetermined. Stupidity may be widespread, but wisdom has always been the work of the few who dared to think differently. Perhaps that few can be you. Escaping the spiral of manufactured ignorance. One of the most dangerous aspects of our era is the illusion of knowledge. With a search bar in our pocket and a constant stream of content at our fingertips, it feels as though we are more informed than any previous generation. Yet, paradoxically, many of us are less capable of critical judgment. Psychologists call this the Dunning-Kruger effect, the tendency for people with limited knowledge to overestimate their understanding. In the context of mass misinformation, this effect multiplies. Individuals who skim misleading headlines or half-truths online often feel emboldened to declare themselves experts, dismissing genuine scholarship as elitist or biased. This is not accidental, it is engineered. Platforms reward outrage and certainty, not nuance. The more confidently falsehood is presented, the faster it spreads. In a sense, stupidity is no longer just an absence of knowledge. It has become a commodity. Ignorance, wrapped in emotional rhetoric, is a product that can be marketed, monetized, and weaponized. But stupidity is not invincible. Throughout history, societies have faced waves of disinformation and managed to push back. Consider the invention of the printing press. It unleashed both profound learning and dangerous propaganda. Yet over time, communities developed tools, libraries, universities, editorial standards, to filter truth from noise. Today, we face a similar challenge on a digital battlefield. The solutions are neither simple nor immediate. Fact-checking organizations and independent journalism fight an uphill battle, but they are crucial counterweights. More importantly, media literacy education, teaching people how to evaluate sources, verify claims, and resist cognitive bias, may be the most effective vaccine against collective gullibility. Countries that invest in these skills, like Finland, have already shown greater resilience against misinformation campaigns. At the individual level, resistance begins with humility, the willingness to admit what we do not know, and the discipline to question what seems too convenient to believe. In a culture of instant reactions, deliberate thinking becomes an act of quiet rebellion. Choosing to slow down, to cross-check, to pause before sharing. That is how ordinary citizens can chip away at the architecture of manipulation. Yet the age of new stupidity is not only a crisis of knowledge, it is also a crisis of trust. When institutions repeatedly fail, when corruption and incompetence erode faith, people turn to simplistic narratives. Conspiracy theories thrive not only because they are seductive stories, but because they fill the vacuum left by broken systems. Therefore, escaping the spiral requires not only better information, but also better institutions, governments, schools, and communities that earn trust by demonstrating transparency and accountability. There is no guarantee of victory. Human history is filled with civilizations that collapsed not because of famine or war, but because of willful blindness, ignoring problems until it was too late. Yet, there is also resilience in our nature. Each act of questioning, each community that insists on reason over rhetoric, becomes a small light against the fog of manipulation. Perhaps the true test of our age is whether we can recognize stupidity not as a personal insult, but as a collective danger, one that can engulf entire societies if left unchecked. The age of new stupidity will not end with a single breakthrough or reform. It will end, slowly and unevenly, if enough people choose to reclaim the dignity of thinking for themselves. In the end, the antidote to manufactured ignorance is not superior intelligence, it is courage. The courage to doubt, to listen, to seek truth even when it is inconvenient. History shows that stupidity, however widespread, is never eternal. The question is whether we are willing to end this age ourselves, or whether we will let it define us.